Some are calling it the Show Me Your Papers 2.0 bill. The legislators call it the Secure the Border Act. Joining us in the studio is Heidi Hommel, and Heidi was at the State House today where, on a party line vote, the GOP did vote to send the resolution to the people. We will have an opportunity to vote this fall on the Secure the Border Act and determine whether or not we want this to go into effect. Heidi, briefly, what are the nuts and bolts of this act? What is it we're going to be looking at as the hot points for voting on in November?
So there's three parts to the Secure the Border Act. The first one involves illegal entry. So it makes it a state crime to come to Arizona from a foreign nation, i.e. Mexico, anywhere except through a port of entry. And then it also strengthens the E-Verify program. So it makes it a state crime to use forged documents to obtain state benefits or public benefits. And then it also increases fentanyl sentencing for someone who sells fentanyl to someone that results in a death. So those are the three areas that it covers.
When it comes to, we're going to come back to the hot topic one here. I want to cover these other two quickly. The fentanyl, I don't think anybody disagrees with saying we need to have stricter penalties on fentanyl. I think that's probably the most popular part of this bill, right?
Yes, that I think, both sides of the aisle could agree on. But also the data that I've been reading, and this comes from my trip to the border down in Douglas a few months ago, the fentanyl is primarily coming through the ports of entry. Okay. Not through, it's the human smuggling that's happening in between the ports, to my knowledge.
So this wouldn't necessarily do anything about the fentanyl problem?
Well, it increases the sentencing. Like, it increases the minimums and the maximum sentencing. So I don't know, is this going to deter the cartel from trying to bring over boatloads of fentanyl pills like they're doing? If
they bring it through a port of entry or anywhere?
Anywhere.
Okay.
So the other that I wanted to touch on briefly is the E-Verify. It's going to increase penalties for people who are using fraudulent documents in order to get E-Verify or stolen documents, identity theft, that sort of thing. Any penalties written in there for employers who have a reasonable knowledge that they are employing someone illegally?
Yes, I'm not sure what the penalties are, but you can't do that.
Right, but there's no other enhancement within this bill for people that are...
It targets the individual as opposed to the employer.
I think there might be penalties for an employer. I need to go back and double check.
We will follow up on that as well. Okay, let's talk about the illegal entry anywhere except through a port of entry, because this is the one that's got all the protests. And you had to wade through some protesters. They closed the gallery today. They said security reasons. Mostly they just want people chanting while they were voting.
Well, I heard that they were... they said social media. They were saying on social media that they were going to interrupt the session, is what I was told. So you can't put that information out there and then expect to have it happen.
Interruption and security problems are two different things, in my opinion.
And it did happen in the Senate. So I think they saw rumblings on social media and were worried about it happening again today in the House. So people showed up. You were allowed to come today. You just weren't allowed to sit in the gallery. All the visitors had to sit in the hearing room, and then the session is screened for you on a TV.
You were down there before when things got rowdy?
It wasn't really rowdy. Oh, yeah, it was rowdy this morning when I showed up at about 9:30. There were people chanting outside. I believe they were lucha protesters.
But I meant a week or 2 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah, I was on the floor when that broke out.
How was that?
That was about a 5-minute delay. I noticed a lot of people leaving in the gallery, and it was because the Senate was voting on the Secure the Border Act, and it looked like it was going to pass. So I just assumed the people were leaving because they were upset. But then they came back in and took off their lucha T-shirts, and they had "Stop the Hate" spelled out, like each person wearing a letter, and then they just started, yelling. I think I forget who was speaking, explaining their vote when it happened, but, they were just saying that it's a racist policy, and then it's bad for Arizona's brand, and it's going to drive businesses away. And yes, lots of comparisons to SB 1070.
Okay, let's draw the differences between SB 1070 and this one.
The language. So SB 1070 said reasonable suspicion, or if you have reasonable suspicion
that someone could be in the country illegally.
Yes, then you're allowed to investigate that further, ask for their papers, follow up on it. This bill says probable cause. And so, the Democrats are saying that probable cause isn't properly defined in the language of this bill, but, probable cause is in the Constitution. It's If a law enforcement is unconstitutional in their probable cause, then repercussions can fall on that law enforcement officer. They're not allowed to do that, but the Democrats are worried, and a lot of people of color spoke today at this meeting,
Sure.
and they were saying that that's been their experience, especially during SB 1070. So those are their concerns.
So how do we differentiate what probable cause is going to be? Obviously, identifying someone based on their race, their color, their religion, all these different protected classes, you're not allowed to do that. What are the officers supposed to do then as far as probable cause goes?
So ideally, it's supposed to be used near the border. So if you witness someone coming across the border, because that's sheriffs have said that.
Sure.
Sheriff's deputies have said they saw people just walk across the border and they can't do anything about it.
I'm fine with that.
Because Border Patrol's tied up, processing asylum people at the ports.
Yeah.
So this would give those border sheriffs the tool in their tool chest to be able to detain people they saw walk across the border.
That makes perfect sense to me.
Yes, and deport them. And then the other thing, what I heard at some of these press conferences leading up to these sessions is like when you have a car with maybe 15 people in it or they've got carpet shoes on. Have you heard of carpet? It's to hide their tracks so they can't follow them through the desert near the border. So if you're wearing carpet shoes or if you've got 15 people in a car, that's not...
I don't know. I see 15 people in a car when I drive home from work.
You do?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Work
Well,
crews?
like they mean in the trunk.
kind of
If you're
thing.
in the trunk of a car wearing carpet shoes.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
That's
So if I pull somebody over and I see somebody that's been hiding under the seat or whatever, then that would be
Yes.
probable cause.
Yes.
Great.
Those are
That makes sense
probable
to me.
cause that this legislation would allow local law enforcement to detain someone.
If I see someone, this would be reasonable suspicion. If I'm a law enforcement officer and I see someone who is walking around after dark, hiding in the shadows, I'm probably going to try to stop and talk to them because
Near the border or just
Anywhere.
here in Phoenix?
Anywhere. I don't care if it's Phoenix or anywhere else. Somebody who's hiding in the shadows in the middle of the night, I'm going to stop and I'm going to check with them. Now, if I find out that that person is Hispanic and they don't speak English, does that give me probable cause to believe that perhaps they are here illegally? This is the gray area, right?
Yes, we need to ask a cop.
We need to ask a lawyer, right? Because that's what it's going to come down to. The cops are going to be asked to make these decisions, which are going to be kind of, I don't know, is it not? And it's going to be the lawyers that are going to be arguing this stuff.
And won't it ultimately
and actually
fall to a judge to decide whether or not?
I asked a lawyer this question over the weekend, and that is not probable cause. If you've got dark skin and don't speak English.
But if I'm mulling around in the middle of the night and
that's probable cause for a different crime, maybe,
Yeah.
but not that you're here.
but
in
now
the
they don't
country
speak
illegally.
now they don't speak English.
I think they would have to flat out tell you. You didn't need to understand Spanish, and if they flat out told you.
I'm not here legally.
Yeah.
Then you'd go, okay, now I've got my probable cause.
Who's going to do that, though?
But also, this bill's not supposed to be used retroactively, like in the past. It's supposed to be used just
Going forward.
What do you mean retroactively in the past?
so. Like, yeah, if someone came here illegally and they're living in Phoenix, not
And
near
they've
the
been
border,
living here
and they-
for 5 years.
Yep. And then, but if that person has an encounter with the local law enforcement agency and it comes out that they're undocumented, will that officer be able to detain them? And
So what's the time
and
limit
then
on
you'd
that?
you'd have to take them to the port of entry. That's what it says.
If I cross illegally 2 days ago and then you run into me up here in the middle of the night, is that different than 5 years ago? Where does that time limit fall
Yeah, I
into?
don't
I guess
know.
it would be when the bill goes into effect.
Lots of questions.
There's some gray areas. There's some of this bill I think we can build on, but there's some real gray areas that I still have concerns about. Heidi, great reporting.
Thank
you
you.
so much for everything that you've done. Heidi Hommel, our KTAR reporter who's been all over this issue from the very beginning.
Thanks for watching The Chris and Joe Show. Click to see more from Chris and Joe and tap the button in the middle to subscribe to KTAR News.